Hey guys, this is Daniel from Sienci Labs. We've been getting a lot of questions and comments about whether the AltMill or the LongMill is right for you, whether one's better than the other, and there's some myths we'd like to debunk about some of the differences, but we'll dive into the video looking at some of the differences on the machines physically, some of the different capabilities, performance, etc. And it will help you kind of make the right decision as far as which one you should be going with, depending on the kind of work you do. Diving into some of the key differences between these two machines, the first one we'll look at is V-wheels versus linear bearings. So on the LongMill, on my left here, you'll see we use V-wheel system, and this essentially is just a series of Delrin V-wheels that ride on our custom extrusion profiles. These have been optimized to perform as best as they could possibly do, and they're very much adequate for most hobby general CNC routing use. There's one small caveat that they may require occasional maintenance or adjustment, and they are consumable items, so maybe on the order of a year, depending on how often you use your machine. You might have to find yourself changing them, but other than that, they're a pretty good option as far as this type of machine is concerned. On the right, you'll see the AltMill uses a square profile linear bearing style of linear motion system. And these are essentially maintenance-free, other than occasional oiling or cleaning. And these also offer much more rigid operation. So this machine can plow through a lot of different material without any kind of chatter or wobble. So the next key difference we'll look at is, again, relating to the linear motion system. So we can see the AltMill on the right uses a ball screw. This offers just a bit more precision and is, again, maintenance-free, other than occasional cleaning and lubrication. On the left, we see the LongMill uses a lead screw system. Historically, this has been a little bit less accurate and a little bit more maintenance involved, but we've been doing a lot of work on our end to come up with our new anti-backlash Delrin nuts, which are essentially maintenance-free for the most part and offer, again, very little to no backlash and generally good precision. So we're trying to narrow the gap between those two and make that sort of precision more affordable for hobby use. So the last key difference regarding the motion systems between these two machines is the type of motor used. On the AltMill, we can see we have closed loop NEMA 23 motors on all three axes. If you don't know what a closed loop motor is, it essentially just means the motor is keeping track of its own position, it's automatically correcting, and then it'll also produce a fault and stop the job if anything goes wrong. So that means if you're working on a $2,000 piece of walnut or something and the x-axis or any part of the machine skips or moves when it wasn't supposed to, the job will stop. You won't scrap your entire piece of material. That's super important for production style work. On the LongMill, we have an open loop motor system. So the same NEMA 23 size. However, these are open loop. They're more than adequate for this type of machine. But of course, if you lose steps or something like that, you're not going to be able to recover. But of course, if you lose steps, you won't know if that's happened yet. The largest difference, I guess, between these two machines and sort of how they were designed is just the frame and how rigid both of these machines are. You can see the AltMill uses a much larger x-axis beam. It uses much thicker plates all around, a lot of precision machined billet CNC parts, and all extrusions all around are just much larger. The LongMill is still very optimized for the type of work it's meant to do in hobby CNC routing. Top of its class really in this price range as far as rigidity and performance goes. It's more than adequate of cutting pretty much any material except for steel, just at a slower pace than the AltMill might be able to. To help you quantify the rigidity difference between these two machines, the AltMill has a rigidity coefficient in the y-axis direction of 1.05 newtons per micron, and then the LongMill has that same rigidity coefficient of 0.13 newtons per micron. So it's a pretty big difference, but it's also important to note that 0.13 newtons per micron is pretty good for that class of machine, and you might actually be surprised to learn a lot of other machines measure very similarly to that, where the AltMill is kind of in a league of its own above those other machines, just in terms of rigidity. So another very obvious difference between these two machines is the AltMill is designed and comes included with full table system. So you will get steel table legs. The entire skeleton aluminum frame of this machine is all freestanding. You don't have to do any kind of table building at all. Put it together and it's a completely freestanding machine. The LongMill, on the other hand, is designed to be mounted as a benchtop CNC machine. So you'll need your table and MDF base, and then you'll want to mount that to that. It's a little bit confusing, but you can see in our video, we've actually just built our own table, repurposing some AltMill legs and building that together with some 2x4 wood. But that would be a table provided by yourself. The last physical difference between these two machines is really just the size options that are available. So the AltMill comes in a 4x4 size, and then the LongMill comes at either a 12 by 30 working area, 30 inch by 30 inch working area, or a 48 by 30 inch working area. So behind me, I've got the 30 inch by 30 inch. And then the other thing to note is that you can actually upgrade that to a 48 by 30 inch if you've started with a 30 by 30 and you need more room. To conclude, some of the less obvious features for the AltMill that are more geared towards production style work are included limit switches by default. It's got y-axis auto squaring for the limit switches. And then it's also got things like tram adjustment, so let you dial those things in. These are a lot of things that may overcomplicate and kind of aren't really needed by hobby CNC users a lot of the time. And we've kind of worked really hard to get the LongMill at a price point that's very accessible for people who don't need all these advanced features. We'll talk a bit about the type of user that each machine was designed for. So the AltMill is intended for someone who's ready to commit to production style projects and work, and you need very minimal maintenance and perfect reliability. You don't want to be scrapping any large pieces of wood like we talked about. And then you also need full 4x4 cutting area, so you can maybe fit a half sheet of plywood through. You also need reduced cycle time as much as possible. So you want to be able to cut things in maybe half or less time is comparatively needed with a LongMill. Those are all important things for production. Obviously, if you're a hobby user, they may matter less to you. You may just be wanting to dip your toes into the hobby and see if you're interested at all. If you're using this for production work and that is directly related to kind of any sort of money or income from projects you're doing, the AltMill is absolutely the choice for you in this class. Alternatively, if you're a hobby user and you're just kind of eyeing this sort of machine and you're not too concerned with the price tag of the AltMill, it's also going to be the best value and best choice for you in this class. The LongMill Mark II was designed to be a very capable hobby CNC router. It's able to do pretty much any kind of project or material that the AltMill can. Maybe the exception starting to be when you get to some larger aluminum projects or maybe some harder materials like that. But it's important to note that a lot of the differences are going to end up being for productivity in terms of time, occasionally maybe doing some maintenance. So it's kind of important to ask yourself what sorts of projects you're really going to be doing and whether you anticipate turning this into a small business. If you're just starting to get acquainted with CNC as a hobby, the LongMill is definitely better for you. The other thing to note about some of the cutting time and performance between the two machines is that it's also highly dependent on the projects you're doing. If you're carving small, little tiny engravings, you might not actually see very much difference in effective cycle time or project time between the two machines. It's really mostly when you're doing a lot of hogging out of hardwood or denser materials like that, where you're carving a whole guitar body maybe, or making a lot of little catch trays or something like that. That's when you start to see that big difference between the two. But if you're just doing this for small decorative kind of hobby things, making a sign for your neighbor or your garage, it's probably not going to be as big of a difference as it may seem. So ultimately, a lot of the advantages for the LongMill are obviously going to come from the cost. It's nearly half the cost of the AltMill, and you kind of just have to be realistic with the types of projects and work that you're going to be doing. If it makes more sense for you, it is the easiest way to get into CNC as a hobby. And then I'll conclude by saying that maybe you're not a user meant for either of these machines, and you might actually be better suited to a lower cost machine. Like you can find a 3018 style, really small CNC machine for maybe $500-600. If you're really just trying to figure out what the hell CNC even is, it might be better for you. If you're a several $1 million business, you might be better off getting a giant 4x8 or 5x10 CNC router with steel beams. It's important to just make sure you're honest with yourself and what you're looking for and make the right decision. And we're just here to help you get all the information needed for that. To wrap things up, obviously the machine that's right for you is just going to depend on the kind of work you're doing. Either way, you can't really lose. You're going to get the same kind of great support from CNC Labs, as well as our entire ecosystem of accessories like the Vortex rotary axis, spindle kits, touch plates, anything else that we might have in the future. Let us know if you have any comments or feedback on this video. If you're looking for any more information on either of the machines, you can find full specs in either of their resources or the product page. And yeah, be sure to like and subscribe to this video if you liked it, and we'll see you guys next time.